Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me? Everybody out there? All right, so I'm going to look at the chat, see if you guys can let me know if the volume is cool. Can you hear the guitar? Anybody? Is it okay? Excellent. Sounds good. Sounds good. Good. Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. Hey, thank you all so much for hanging out today. Not that there's a whole lot, much more, probably better to do. We're all locked up, all locked down. But I also want to say thanks to Kiesel and the Kiesel guitar, which I've been using. This is the latest signature model. But basically, I want to make this going to be really informal. It's just kind of a hangout, and I'm just going to grab a backing track here and just jam out a little bit. You guys, and when I start playing, let me know whether or not the level is cool with the backing track, because sometimes it's hard to tell here. So just a random. Thank you. So that's a typical warm-up, morning warm-up for me. Just grab a backing track and start jamming out. Feels a little strange here with the sound balance, but hopefully it sounds okay with you guys. So this is weird. It's always strange doing these seminars. I've done a few of these now since the lockdown, and without seeing faces and reactions, all I can do is kind of hope that everybody's enjoying it and getting something out of it. So I'm just going to talk randomly about some ideas that I thought would be fun, because we're only here for an hour, so I'm going to try to cram it all in. I've been teaching really for about 30 years at this point, and I guess the most common type of student that I get is a guy who is really good player already, good vibrato, good tone, good sense of phrasing and cool licks. But usually what they're looking to do is just expand, get away from just inside sort of pentatonic sounding things and blues licks and stuff like that. So I thought it would be fun today, at least, to just come up with a couple of ideas, or just demonstrate a couple of ideas that are really, really easy to use to get out of the typical pentatonic sound. And so one of the things, or even the pentatonic type of phrasing, or phrasing that comes with those kinds of scales a lot of times. So a really cool trick, or a neat little thing that you can do, is take a pentatonic scale on just one string, like say the G string. So I'll play this in A minor. And just that. And then I'm looking at the fifth above that. So in this case, I've got, and I'll play like a little sequence sometimes. It's just the fifth above to the actual pentatonic note, and then slide to the next pentatonic note. So. And that's not really the trick. The trick is that you can do the same exact thing with, say, the octaves. Obviously, you can go. So what's kind of nice to do is actually just go back and forth between those, and it makes it sound like you're way more. It makes it sound like you're thinking a lot more than you really are. So if I play an octave version, and then the fifth octave, so it's kind of a fun little trick. I'm just going to play a little bit in the A minor for a second, so you can just hear how easy it is to implement that. Hopefully you can hear that. And so anyway, I'm getting a little crazy with it, but that comes with this thing that I used to do when I was teaching private lessons, and I would show people this sort of sequence that would get them off of playing like the downbeat on everything all the time. Like, you know, we have a tendency, if we hear this kind of groove, we want to, you know, that's very downbeat oriented, so it starts to sound kind of predictable. And so when I was trying to get guys to like get off of that a little bit, I gave them an exercise that went like this. It was just sort of a polyrhythm where you have 7 notes. So I'll just play this sequence here, and this is for A minor. So I'm basically looking at an E minor 7th arpeggio, which is a nice sound against A minor. You can hear that sound. But I'm going to take a specific sequence here, and I'm just going to go like this. So I skipped over the B string, and then I'll play the B string note that we skipped over and end it with this. So I'll just play real slow. So even though it's a 7-note sequence, if I count in 4s, 1, takes on a polyrhythmic feel, so everything becomes displaced. And so if you have a tendency to play real downbeat oriented, this forces you to not do that. You can't help but play things that sound a little bit more displaced and less predictable if you do this. So on a rhythm like this is kind of fast, but so you take that kind of thing, and I'll take a couple of arpeggios. I'll take the E minor one that we just did, and then A minor at the 12th fret. These are all 5th string root-based arpeggios. And I apologize if I'm going quick, but I'm trying to cram it all into an hour here. So, so if I do the same type of thing at the 12th fret, then I can use the thing that we did earlier to get back and forth. So use other arpeggios, major 7, C major 7. So anyway, just kind of a fun little trick to use. I'm going to back off some distortion here. Feels a little messy. So anyway, these are just like really easy things that you can play on the guitar. I like to teach things that are really easy, that are almost instantly applicable if you're just coming from a place of playing a lot of blues scales and pentatonic stuff. You're just looking for something to instantly do. Another nice thing that you can play that a lot of people don't do on the guitar for some reason is just taking advantage of fourths, right? Just taking advantage of all these places on the fretboard where things line up on one fret, on a single fret. And just as long as you navigate that rhythmically, and creatively, you can come up with some really cool ideas. Like for instance, if you just watch this. I'll go. So that's pretty easy. But we add a little something to that. Let's say I play this. So that's really easy stuff, even though it probably sounds a little bit more complex than it is, but it's really, really nice to be able to, instantly do things that sound pretty cool and aren't difficult. Right? This is it. Really, it's more. Anyway, so these are just my little easy little things. Let's see. Please demonstrate chromatic ideas. Please teach how I can play chromatics to real life situations. Okay. All right. So real life chromatic stuff. I don't do. It's funny because a lot of the things that I play are, in other words, the perception a lot of times when I'm jamming with someone is that they'll say to me, "Well, I've got all these licks that just keep coming," but in reality, a lot of these things are long sequential ideas that they're really repeating themselves a lot. And but the nice thing is that once you kind of know what you're doing, once the thing about a sequence like this is that it's only 4 notes, so it's easy to recognize it after 1 or 2 times through. If you have a sequence that's got like 20 notes in it, then it becomes unrecognizable to a listener when you repeat that. So I have a lot of licks and sequences that are really long. And so to answer your question about chromaticism, there are just certain ideas that I have that will translate to all these different shapes. And a lot of this comes from listening to people like Frank Ambali, Brett Garsed, Alan Holdsworth, Scott Henderson, and just tons of these amazing players. So one of the things I like to do is this kind of sequence where I'll have. So this sort of brings in a little bit of a bop feel because of the displacement. So like a rock player might play, whereas a guy that's a little bit more jazz influenced might go. So 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4. So that's kind of a nice run right there that will translate to a lot of different shapes. I'll just play that again. So I'm thinking A minor again, or some mode related to G major, and I'm just starting off with this E minor triad. So if I play that and then I use a sequence like this, and I think of this literally as a sequence because it will translate to a lot of different shapes. So just that alone is a nice phrase, and that's a real life thing. If I'm, you were saying real life situations. So I can do this if I want, which is pretty ordinary and pretty boring. But this is no different. It just sounds cooler because it's less commonly heard. So let me just take that a little bit further. So that's it. So basically, that's a lick, right? It's a sequence that's applicable to other places. But again, here's what happens if I do this in a slightly different place. Let's say I play this up here. So it's I can use that anywhere. So as long as you have a sequence in mind, I guess the problem, again, I'm just you're not here in front of me, so a lot of times when I see people trying to do, rock players trying to do chromatic ideas right away, they just come across a little stiff because they're sort of seeing that kind of thing, and they're not really working it into a shape. So when I see this, I'm seeing E minor, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, G major 7, A minor, and then the chromaticism is really just connecting. It's almost filling in the gaps for things that would ordinarily have been this. So we're just sort of filling gaps in. But there is a little bit another part of this, which is that you want to, or at least I want to, have the accents of things in certain places. So in other words, to me, where notes get accented is just as important as the notes themselves. It's sometimes more important. Like, if I hear this, but if I hear this, 1 and a 2, to me that's a lot more interesting sound. Because it's not just because of the notes, but because of the placement of them and because of the displacement of them. So that's an idea. Some other stuff that you might want to look at chromatically. I don't know if that's helping you at all, but if I were to take that a little bit further, so I kind of like this as a lick where I can play. That's sort of a classic, jazz kind of bop phrase a little bit. And so like in jazz, I'm not a jazz guitar player at all, so please don't, all you jazz guitar players out there, please don't judge. But how do you visualize the chord tones when moving around the neck so fast? That's a good question. I don't know. Well, let me finish. I'll finish this point, then I'll get to that. you know, you've seen these things where people are in jazz. A lot of times, it's common for people to surround a strong tone. If I were going to play A, they might play. They'll play a note above it. They'll play a note below it, and they'll sort of surround it and then play it, and it creates that tension. And I do that a lot, but I'm doing it kind of differently because let's say that I play this. If I'm so to me, that's an easy way to do what I hear a lot of sax players do. Right? In my mind, I'm just going to say to myself, I'm targeting that A note, but it's an easy fingering, and I can do that again from the A, where I can end up sort of getting that sixth. In this case, since I'm in Dorian. That's kind of a cool note to play. So your question was what now? How do you visualize the chord tones when moving around the neck so fast? Visualize the chord tones. I'm not visualizing chord tones. I'm hearing chord tones. I'm recognizing chord tones with my ear. And so, you know, to be honest with you, if I'm really improvising and not just demonstrating licks, I'm really trying to play what I hear in my head. And what I hear in my head is going to be dictated strongly by the musical backdrop that I'm playing on top of. So I really hear intervals against chord tones. That's what I hear. If I hear a chord that sounds like that, then the question is, what do I want to play over that? What do I hear over that? If I want to hear, you know, if I like the 9, you know, or maybe I'll hear a 6, right? And so I kind of know where those things are, and I know what shapes give me those sounds. So I'm not thinking in terms of visualizing chord tones as much as I am just hearing things against chords, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure if it does, but let's see. How about a nice altered lick over the dominant? Okay, so altered. Remember, guys, I'm a rock guitar player. I started with AC/DC and Jimmy Page, but these are good questions. So, and I do use some of these things that you're asking about. So the altered dominant sound is big. It's really fun. You know, it's sort of like if you're looking to to sort of get from rock player to kind of fusion guy. The altered scale is a great starting place because just playing in a blues or playing over a 1-4-5 and having that 5 chord that you can address as an altered chord with that kind of thing, or is a nice starting point. So one of the things that I see a lot is I'm in a blues box. I'm going to go to a different key just so we can have. I'll go back to the opening song. So this is G minor. So right away, before anything even happens, if somebody says to me, "Hey, come on stage with us, Greg, and we're playing in G minor," right away, I already am aware of what the 5 chord would be, because that's where I'm going to be playing altered stuff 99% of the time. So I'm already looking at this, and I'm already thinking about these kinds of sounds. That's already happening before I even get there. So right out of the gate, my blues box has this augmented triad built into it, which is really, really convenient because I don't have to really go anywhere. I can just go. And I really like the idea that I see this a lot. Sorry. So here's my augmented sort of triad sound in the blues box, which is going to work nicely with this D. And then I sort of see this shift up one fret. So that area is great for me because it's really convenient for just getting that altered sound very, very simple, very nicely and comfortably. So an altered lick, it's more of a shape or a concept that I would see in this area if I was in this area. So I'll just play a little bit. I'll play through this shape a few times. You can see how it might come out. So, here we go. So there's other shapes. A real convenient shape is this one, which I call this my second home. So if this is my blues box at the 3rd fret or the 15th fret, then my summer home, my second home is the G minor, in this case the 10th fret, based on the 5th string. So it's a simple way that I kind of see the fretboard that way. And in that area, I've got some nice shapes as well for altered. So this is a nice one that I use a lot, where I'll just play something like. And that's a nice sound. A lot of times you don't need all that to alter. You just need just a little hint of it. And you know, so there's tons of these all over the place. But another nice one is to go down 2 frets from the key that you're in. And you've got that kind of sound. So yeah, I don't really have that many licks. I have more shapes and concepts that I see, and then I'll try to just navigate my way through them when I get there. So yeah, I don't know if that helps a little bit. Let's see what else we've got. Will this live be online once finished? Probably. What are you thinking when you develop your crazy tapping lines that last really long? They're too hard to transcribe. I'm not thinking anything, probably, except to just have a long line that keeps going. So if I use my little cheat thing here, I'm not really thinking about anything when I'm playing that way. When that's happening, that's more of a in my mind, it's a what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of a I can't think of the word. Anyway, it's a single concept. It's not a bunch of notes to me. It's like one thing that's happening. It's one statement, And so it's just a matter of how long I want that statement to last. And so in this case, again, if I'm looking at this is just G minor, right? So the easy. If I want a long line, I might play. So what am I thinking? I'm just thinking about making sure that I'm in key for the most part, and that I'm creating the perception that I'm looking for, which is that word I can't find for some reason. It's an easy word, but it's really the same thing with any fast playing. Fast playing to me is a lot like slow playing in the sense that it's one. It's not rhythmic. I'm not on the grid, right? So I'm not thinking about this. I'm not playing like this. So in that case, I'm thinking very rhythmic. The rhythm of what I'm doing is just as important as the notes, and sometimes more important. But when I'm playing really slow or really fast, it's more texture. There's the word. There's the word I'm looking for. It's more of a texture idea in my mind. It's a feel. I really, and honestly, so if I play really slow, same thing as playing really fast. So the two are really the same to me. So in my mind, real fast playing and real slow playing are kind of like similar in that they're both off the grid. They're not rhythmically. They're not addressing the music rhythmically. They're more textural based. So it's I'm not saying that's correct in any way, shape, or form. It's just the way that my weird brain tends to think of things. Cheat my way through high school and college. Here, 49, I gotta go back and actually learn what I'm doing. Any tip for better rhythm playing in solo? Hey, Greg. Okay, so lots of good questions here. Lots of really flattering questions. Let me pick one here. Tips for better rhythm playing and soloing. That's a really, man, that's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, the reality is that anything that you do is going to get better if you just do it over and over again. Do you use any fretboard visualization techniques? Yeah, let me answer this one because this one's easier for me. The other one's a really good question, so I apologize for not answering your question about the tips for soloing, and there's many of them. There's so many of them that we could do a whole 2 hours on just that alone. But let me address this question. Do you use any fretboard visualization techniques? And the answer for that is yes. When I'm playing, somewhere around the early 90s, between my first album and Introspection, I finally got hip to the concept of superimposing. And that changed my guitar playing. It really did. It changed everything. Because prior to that, it was really a matter of just, practicing scales, playing as fast as possible, trying to get better technique, obviously get better timing, things like that. But there wasn't a lot of emphasis on harmony. On Schofields of the world, I kept thinking to myself, there's something that these guys are doing. There's something that, Franco Bali, and I think there's something more than just technique that's happening here that's making them sound so mature and so much more sophisticated. So I had to really listen and figure that out. And what I started to discover was that there just was much less emphasis on these chord tones in their soloing than rock players generally have. So rock players and blues players tend to really just go right for the chord tone. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with playing, or that's fine. But what I was hearing was something that was more interesting to me at that point, which was notes that were more colorful. So I started to realize that if I just took a chord scale, I'll just stay in G major for a second. And I started to, if I looked at a chord scale and I said to myself, all right, so here's G major. And G major has the same notes as all these other modes like A Dorian, B Phrygian, C Lydian, and so forth. Then it would seem to me that if I take these chords and play them as separate notes, and so forth, then I'm playing all these notes of the same key. All of these chords in the form of an arpeggio should work when I'm soloing. And so that was really a big, big change in my guitar playing because it was true. That worked immediately. So when I'll go back to this A minor jam. So in this case, A Dorian, right? So that's real kind of rock and roll sounding. So then I started to experiment. I thought, okay, well, what happens if I play G major over this? And to my ears, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. As long as I resolve it to something that makes sense to the ear. B minor. Minor 7 flat 5 on F sharp, right? C major. So the point that I'm making here is that I started to discover that things could sound a lot more interesting if I started to see the fretboard more in terms of these fifth string root-based arpeggios. And I really do see the guitar that way now. I don't really see, I mean, I see scales, obviously, but it's such an instant convenience for me to just see a shape and know that it represents a certain sound that I'm looking for. So if I want the sound of, if I like that note, forgive my singing chops, guys, but that is, now I can say to myself, well, I know what that sound is. That reminds me of whatever that interval reminds me of. But I also, but more importantly, I know where it's located and I know what it looks like. So if I want to have my soloing have that feel, instead of always just sounding like just scales, then I can have a very specific manner in which I can go about doing that. Or if I like the 9, I know I can go right to C major 7. I can go down 2 frets on the 5th string and play this shape. Or play around with that shape, right? I can have licks that sort of remain, that keep, I'm sort of keeping the licks, the licks I'm coming up with are sort of based on the shapes of these arpeggios, so that it retains the quality that the arpeggio delivers. It doesn't have, you don't have to play an arpeggio necessarily, but you can play around with them and get those tonalities, if that makes any sense. So in this case, because I've been dealing with Dorian, there's really only 2 notes that are colorful outside of the pentatonic scale, which in this case would be either the 9 or the outside of the pentatonic scale, which in this case would be either the 9 or the 13 or the 6. And so in my mind, if I'm going to play a guitar solo, and I want to have color that's beyond just the blues licks, if I want to have that extended sound, chord extension sound, then I have to pick one of those 2 or go back and forth between those 2 in this particular case. But that was really the way that things changed dramatically when I started to see the fretboard that way. And when I teach that, and there have been many cases like when I started off today, I got a lot of guys who show up and they're great players already. They already sound great. They have great vibrato. They have great technique, but they're sort of very pentatonic. So they'll say, what can I do instantly to have a different quality about my soloing? And right away, I'll start off with just these 2 arpeggios, just 2 of them. And it will usually be the 5th string root-based major 7th shape that's down 2 frets from the blues box. Or the minor 7th that's up 2 frets from the blues box. And just those 2 arpeggios alone, those are 2 methods of easily having more of this sound in your soloing, right? So right away, I've seen guys right in front of me start to look at their hands and go, wow, I never heard myself sound like this. And all they're really doing is saying to themselves, so here's a note that's part of the arpeggio. Blues lick. The other nice thing about these arpeggio shapes is that the G string becomes a great transportation string. It's kind of like almost like a train track that you can jump on and move to another sound. So like if I like this sound, But I also like this sound. These are all arpeggios. Anyway, so struggling with my tune here a little bit for some reason. Probably because it's a live seminar. But anyway, so what else do we have? How did you write Jumpstart? So Jumpstart's a good question. Jumpstart was a lick that that was based off of kind of what I was doing earlier. So when I was showing you earlier these arpeggio shapes and these sequential ideas. So I like these things. I started to play around with that, and I remember one day I was just sitting there going, here's C sharp, and here's the minor seventh arpeggio that I keep talking about. There's a fifth above that. So I started to play around with then I started to notice that there's another shape similar. It's more of a minor 7-flat-5 sound. So I thought, how could I connect those two together? And I just started playing around with. And at the time, I was also listening a lot to a musician by the name of Michel Camilo, the Cuban amazing piano, jazz pianist. And a lot of his music is very, very Latin in the sense that there's not a lot of hits on downbeat. So it's a lot of and so I was kind of thinking about trying to write a song like that. It didn't come out like that at all. But what did happen was I was able to connect these two arpeggios together, the minor seventh, by just having sort of a blues intro. And then having those, so this is you can see the arpeggio. That's in this case, A flat minor seventh arpeggio. And then that's the minor 7-flat-5 arpeggio that connects with it. So I was able to put those together. And I was kind of once I sort of came up with that riff, I kind of instantly heard this song in a matter of like an hour and a half. And it just kind of all fell together. So I hope that answers the question. Let's see, what do you got? Gary, you haven't heard Greg Howe before? Oh, okay, you're talking to somebody else. Do more Holdsworth covers on your album. I like your version for the Cosmos. Thank you. Yeah, that was a little scary. I mean, it's very scary to step into the shoes of Holdsworth because it just really doesn't get better than that. So you have to bring your own. That was one of those situations where I was working on that album while I was on tour, with NSYNC, the pop band NSYNC, and I had to leave, and I didn't have a whole lot of material. So Mike Varney, the record company owner, Shrapnel's record company owner, suggested to me that I do that cover. And so I remember listening to it, and I had heard it, but I hadn't heard it at that point for years. And at first when I heard it, I thought, wow, this is a really complicated song. And it is, but when you actually analyze it, it wasn't quite so bad once I got in there a little bit. But it was part of the reason we did that song is because I'd run out of time to write. I had to leave to go on tour with NSYNC, and I hadn't come up with enough material yet. So we'll do one more question here. Is Extraction 2 ever going to happen? A question from one of our sales guys. So my suggestion to you is that you talk to a guy named Victor Wooten, because we all love him, but I've been unsuccessful in trying to get him to tour with me on this album or record another one or anything like that. So if it were up to me, absolutely. But it's not entirely up to me, because it takes other guys to put a band together besides just me. So let's see what we have, Gary. Greg, can you show us some bossa nova style shredding? I don't even know what that means. Bossa nova style shredding. I mean, honestly, that's a strange question, because a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, I uploaded myself to social media just jamming over some bossa nova track. And I think it might have been when I had hurt my finger. But I always find it interesting, because I'm not really like a lot of guitar players who are good at switching into these different roles. They can sound like a jazz guy, or they can sound like a country guy. They can sound like all these different styles of players. I can get to different kinds of music, but pretty much what ends up coming out of my amplifier always just sort of sounds like me. So it's hard for me to even know what that means, because when you say bossa nova style shred, it's just going to be me playing to that music and playing the same types of licks that I normally would play, hopefully having a little bit of more of a sort of rhythmic sensibility about what's happening. Any examples of the use of Lydian dom over the chord in blues like Scott Henderson? Yeah, and this will have to be the last question, guys, because I know this went fast. I thought it would, but we're already at an hour. So yes, let's see if I can have a let's see if I can find a dominant seventh thing here. A7 funk backing track. Oh, this is a backing track put together by a friend of mine, Luca Mantavinelli. Great guitar player, by the way. So it's just, yeah, it's a nice sound, because I also like anyway, so it's just kind of a fun sound. It's always tough in a clinic situation to get into it, but yeah, it's a great sound. You can't really go wrong with it. If you learn a couple of scales, shapes, and you've got a couple of licks, it really it always sounds nice. So especially if you're Scott Henderson and you sound great anyway. But yes, I guess the answer to your question, I use that a lot. I don't really, again, you'll notice with me, I don't really have a ton of licks. I have more concepts and shapes that I tend to look at and see, and then I jump in there with my fingers crossed, hoping that some good things happen. Bunch of Marigold questions. Marigold was a fun thing. I just want to say, you know, Marigold was great. It was a lot of fun when we were doing it. We just, you know, not every situation always finds people on exactly the same page. So I feel very proud of the album. Amazing musicians in that band and still good friends. Yeah, there's certain things just, you know what I mean? You know, sometimes it's like you've seen marriages where people get divorced and then they get along much better after they split up. So that's kind of how it is with Marigold. You know, we're all real tight and close, but it's better that we don't work together, I think. But anyway, guys, I want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope it's been fun. It's definitely been fun for me. And I've been away from the social media game for a little bit just because I've been working on a lot of stuff. I've actually been really busy, but I'll be back. I promise I'm coming back. I'm not. I haven't left. So working on albums, working on instructional stuff, and I've done quite a few sort of online seminars and things like that. But anyway, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks to Kiesel, and we'll catch up soon. Take care.